Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, March 21st, 2020, and today we're going to be discussing the effects of COVID-19 on the 2020 presidential election. So actually, this is essentially, I guess, the first ever video that I'm going to be doing with a continuously updated 2020 presidential map. Many of you guys were wondering what website I was using. I am using yet another political map simulator.com, which is, I guess, hyphenated at yapms.com. You can go ahead and check that website out. It's really helpful. It has so many different types of, I guess, maps. So pretty much we're going to be taking a look at the 2020 electoral map and update it as the weeks continue, probably updated around every 2 weeks. So it's going to start to see a little bit more of a headline rather than this video, which is purely going to be the effects of COVID-19 on the election. I'm going to start updating and shifting the 2020 electoral map as I see fit throughout the primary ending of this primary season and moving ahead into the general election season around every 2 weeks. But right now, it looks like the assumed Democratic nominee is Vice President Biden. Obviously, that is not necessarily going to change, but still up for contention. We are still seeing a number of primaries. Almost half the states have not voted yet. I think more than half of the states have not voted yet. So, and we have a whole number of delegates we still need to allocate in favor of either Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden. So that's definitely not 100% finished. Whether there will be a contested convention or not is the actual question that we will be asking. But let's go ahead and keep filling this in, pretty much characterizing all of the safe states. I don't know why I didn't fill in those two for the Democratic Party and Republican Party. So this is pretty much as the map starts off tonight. This is the, I guess, same since 2000 map besides Indiana. And this is what we are likely going to see categorized as safe states as we move into the general election. Now, Donald Trump's handling of the coronavirus situation, based off public opinion, does not seem the most positive, but it's a very polarized issue. If you take a look at the approval rating of Donald Trump's handling of COVID-19, it's practically the same as his approval rating, meaning there are about 44% of Americans that approve of it, and then the rest either disapprove or have no opinion. I believe the disapproved number is 48, so it looks like it's about even, and honestly, if I was to personally assess it, that would have no say into this video. I come from a state like Maryland, so Larry Hogan's pretty much taking over everything here, so I don't necessarily see any full effects from the president. Everything, the news media definitely can be spun one way or another depending on which news station you're watching, so I'm not going to use that as an exact reference point, but the general, I guess, vibe with the general public, it still seems, number one, it is a very polarized issue, but it still seems that Donald Trump is being overall disapproved of. Maybe not in Republican states, obviously, but definitely in some other swing states and Democratic states. That's generally just how Donald Trump's approval rating has been throughout the entire 4 years of his presidency. And not 4 years, I guess 3 years, moving into 4 at the end of the year. But when we take a look at the, I guess, general trends of the American public, they tend to let things blow over. I guarantee it, if COVID-19 is solved by the end of April and we move ahead and everything gets fixed per se, which I honestly do not think is going to happen unless everyone actually stays indoors, and it doesn't look like that's actually happening. But besides that, I do believe that if that blows over, if this entire situation blows over, the American public will literally forget about it by the time the RNC hits. And this is why the direct effect of as if we are holding the election today would not be too positive for President Trump. But President Trump has benefited off a system of the national news media that clicks off after a 24-hour news cycle. New thing. I mean, when we talked about the only thing that was continuous in the 2016 cycle is probably those leaked tapes about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton's Benghazi and email scandals. Other than that, can you really pinpoint anything else that was truly a huge story? The effects of COVID-19 on this election are probably going to be negative for Donald Trump as a whole. If the general public already disapproves of his handling of it, there's no really good way for him to move up unless something changes, and that's essentially what this video is for, discussing it as if it was affecting us today, and which it is, but this would essentially just be how the electoral map would look. So if we're talking about an American public that already disapproves of the president, this would only further their, I guess you could say, anger towards President Trump. 2018 was, I guess, best way to show that the Democrats actually had a force. Though 2010 was an amazing year for the Republican Party, they did not win in 2012, but it gave a general idea that they were going to increase their electoral count, which they did. And it doesn't look like Joe Biden is exactly, I'm so sorry, a worse candidate than Hillary Clinton. But that's just besides the point. Let's assume it is Bernie Sanders. Either both of these Democratic nominees definitely do not have as much baggage as Hillary Clinton did. The reason why I'm filling in all of these states as likely for the Democratic Party or lean for the GOP, mainly that's just how it's going to go, and based off of electoral trends from 2016, 2018, and moving ahead into current data that we have right now about these states, Democratic primary turnout, polling data as well. Even though some of you guys may not necessarily agree with me using that as part of my analysis, it's still one of the only few data points that we have until we actually hit general election season. And I truly believe Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, Colorado, New Mexico, and Nevada are all going to be likely Democratic states. They were Democratic states in 2016. They were overwhelmingly Democratic states in 2018, especially with local elections with the number of Republican seats flipping. Virginia, Minnesota, Colorado, Nevada, New Hampshire holds for the Democrats in all 5 of those states. New Mexico has just generally been a Democratic state in years past, so there's no real reason to change it now, especially with this effect on the president. This is a nationwide thing. This is not a liberal, conservative, independent type of thing. The coronavirus affects us all. We are probably all going to be quarantined at some point where we are forcefully locked into our houses other than going to either the supermarket or going to the hospital for an emergency, various things. But this is affecting every single American. It's in all 50 states. West Virginia recently just got their first case, and it looks like the governors are pushing primaries. They're doing all they can to actually fix it and at least stop the spread of the problem. But President Trump doesn't seem to be as proactive as these governors, though he did have a very good tone based off when he backtracked on what he said previously. I mean, the facts are facts. Donald Trump definitely did downplay the coronavirus as it began. There's also that thing that the Democratic Party would definitely hit at Donald Trump cutting the pandemic department of the CDC in 2018. So that definitely is something that would hit him hard, especially with a lot of people going to be affected by this, probably hundreds of thousands of Americans at a low point as this continues to spread. Moving over into states that are already looking like they're going to be in favor of the Democrats are definitely going to move even further in favor of the Democrats. I'm talking about likely margins possibly in the Rust Belt. Definitely more so in Michigan. I'm not so much seeing a likely margin in Wisconsin, but I could see it in Pennsylvania, especially if Joe Biden is the nominee considering he was born there. If this prolongs to Election Day, or recently, I guess, based off Election Day, mid-October gets solved or is eradicated, whatever it might be, won't be eradicated, but is contained in the United States, this will be fresh in Americans' mind. The lack of leadership, as the Democrats would put it, from the White House would be, I mean, who else are you going to blame? You can't blame each individual state governor, so they're going to aim it on Donald Trump and blame it on him. And the American public 100% will definitely consider that when they're making their choice at the ballot box. When we have independent voters that are already iffy between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, a lot of them are going to end up going to the Democratic nominee if they believe that Donald Trump failed to lead them in a time of crisis, which is right now. And based off the general approval ratings, it doesn't look like Donald Trump is going to gain support in terms of how he's reacting to the situation, but probably only lose it as it continues to loom in the back of American minds. Because right now, this is the early stages of the COVID-19 crisis. So we could likely see the Democrats paint this maybe negative or positive in favor of them or against President Trump, which could be obviously not whatsoever beneficial to the Donald Trump campaign. But pretty much this is how I'm comfortable putting the Rust Belt. Taking a look at the surrounding Democratic and Republican, I guess, swing states, we have states like Arizona and North Carolina and Ohio. North Carolina, I think, will be a narrow Republican victory, probably somewhere around a tilt. The reason why Texas and Georgia are lean, mainly because Georgia was already going to be close, and Texas has been moving further and further to the left as we continue through each election season. 2016, it was an 8 to 9 point margin. 2018, in that Senate race, was a 3-point margin. 2020, now, it looks like. Sorry, my screen recorder cut out, but I was talking about Texas and how I believe that it will be within a 5-point margin at this point. There's a number of changing demographics in the state that benefits the Democrats all around, and that general Sunbelt area. California is becoming a more Democratic state. Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico looks like it's already in that column as well. Moving over to Arizona has been increasingly turning into a Democratic state as well. So Texas actually might be next in line. But moving over into some of these remaining swing states, we have two heavy Hispanic population states, and then Ohio and Iowa. Well, we've seen election results in the primaries from Florida, Arizona, and Iowa. We would have seen them in Ohio, but Governor Mike DeWine moved the primary until June, I believe, 2nd. There's a whole court case there. The Democrats are trying to make it a mail-only option and finish it by the end of April, which would get the results earlier, but would not allow for in-person voting. But Florida, Arizona, Iowa. So Iowa was won by Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders in terms of delegate count. It was around a tie. Bernie Sanders won the popular vote there. But Bernie Sanders did not come close in Florida whatsoever. He was barely viable in some of those congressional districts and got around 22% of the vote, while Joe Biden got, I believe, 63% of the vote in Florida in the Democratic primary. Though Hillary Clinton did win the Democratic primary in Florida by 30%, Joe Biden did win by 40% this time around, and there was increased turnout despite the COVID-19 fears, which is exactly what this video is about. So it is possible the Democratic turnout might have been higher. Just generally, though, the Democratic Party is going to have much more of an advantage than they did in 2016 in Florida, but the Republican stronghold there has held for a couple of years now. The Democrats lost there in the governor race and the Senate race, though by narrow margins, still lost in that race itself. And Donald Trump's approval rating isn't exactly the worst in Florida. It's lower in a number of other states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And recently he's been approved of in Florida by a couple of polls, actually. And a number of election data between Donald Trump and either Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden show President Trump winning in the state of Florida. So I'm actually going to put that one in the tilt GOP column. But if we take a look at Iowa and Ohio, these are actually states that previously I would say are lean Republican states. But after a reanalysis of both of those states, they tend to swing with how the Rust Belt swings. When those go red, those go red as well. And when they went for Obama, Iowa and Ohio followed suit. And it's not just that, obviously, but there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between Donald Trump and Iowa and Ohio. He hasn't been, I guess, he didn't hold on to the base too well in 2018. The Democratic Party picked up 2 House seats in Iowa and I believe held on to the Senate seat in the state of Ohio, though they did lose the governor election. But his approval rating isn't exactly the best there either. He's had a history of having a very low approval rating in both Iowa and Ohio, surprisingly, despite them being overwhelming Republican states in 2016. So it is possible that the Democrats do end up going there and winning. I'm going to leave those in the toss-up column. Along with Arizona, I'm probably going to leave that one in the toss-up column as well. Though I do think that Joe Biden will probably win the state of Arizona if he is the nominee and things continue down the trend that they're going right now. This is just a general Democratic nominee thing, and I'm not going to assume anything. And I do think that these 3 states are definitely up for grabs. Any state that's not considered likely, I think, does have a possibility of changing. But honestly, the rest of these likely states, including Michigan and Pennsylvania, probably not going to change. Michigan seems to be very much like the Indiana for Barack Obama, winning it one term, but then losing it by a lot the second term, assuming that Donald Trump does win again. Pennsylvania, a little bit like North Carolina. But other than that, just taking a look at this electoral map, it's still not exactly a blowout for the Democrats. We're in such a polarized time where even the COVID-19 response is, practically a dead split between the country, between Republicans and Democrats. So obviously this election cycle would be too. And I generally do not think that this COVID-19 crisis will have too much of an impact on the presidency, considering that some people already approve of it and a number of people also disapprove of it. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.